The sewn cast off is a very neat way of finishing edges, particularly with garter stitch. This cardigan band in front of me here has been finished with the sewn cast off. So if I just turn it over, you can still see it's a nice neat cast off edge. It also has quite a bit of flexibility and looks very nice on something like garter stitch or moss stitch. So to do the sewn cast off, you need to thread your yarn into a sewing needle. You need about 2 to 3 times the width. You don't need as much yarn as you would if you were doing something like grafting Kitchener stitch, where you're actually sewing the shape of the stitch, which needs to be at least 3 times the width of the length you have to sew off. But you do need to make sure that you've got plenty of yarn. You don't want to have to join extra yarn in halfway through your cast off. So to demonstrate, I'm using a contrast colour. I'm going to take, normally I would have threaded it through the yarn end here, and you go through the first stitch from right to left as if it was almost like a purl stitch, and pull the yarn through. Then you come back round to the end of the needle, and this is now what you're going to repeat. So we're going to go through the first 2 stitches with our sewing needle from right to left, pull the yarn all the way through, and then go back through the first stitch from left to right and drop it off the needle. So then we go through the next 2 from right to left, pull the yarn through, go back through the first stitch from left to right and drop it off the needle. You can vary how much you tighten, but it's very unlikely that you can make this cast off too tight. It does allow the edge to remain more flexible than some of the other methods of casting off. So we go through 2 from right to left, and then back through 1 from left to right and drop it off the needle. Through 2, pull the needle through. In fact, I split the stitch there, so I'm going to have to actually undo that. Unfortunately, I wasn't paying enough attention, so I've just missed going through the stitch properly. But that'll give me the opportunity to demonstrate how I thread my sewing needle. Some people do try to thread their needle by just pushing the yarn through the point. Yarn is too soft to do that, so if you fold it over the point of the needle and then pinch tightly, pull the needle out, and then you can push the pinch section through the needle to thread your sewing needle. So let's try that one again. So I'm going to go through both stitches, so I'm going right through the center of the stitch and then back through the first stitch, drop it off the needle, through the center of the 2 stitches, back through the last stitch, through the 2 from right to left, and then back through the first stitch from left to right and drop it off. So I am pulling the yarn a bit tight at the minute, but you can still see there's a fair bit of flexibility, and if this was in the same colour it would be a very neat finish to the top edge of your knitting. You can use this technique as a decorative finish, in which case I would have worked the last row of the knitting, or the last 2 rows in garter stitch, in the contrast colour before then sewing the cast off. So I'm just coming up towards the end of the sewing here. Again, I would probably do this with right sides facing me. You could work it, if you're working in the same colour, you could work it from the wrong side, but generally speaking, when I'm working this particular cast off, I would be working it with the right side facing me, because when it's finished it just looks as though you've finished with a row of garter stitch. You don't have a hard edge that you might get with the chain cast off or the chains. I've got to the last stitch now, so I'm just going to go through it for the last time from right to left and drop it off. So it makes a nice neat cast off edge, and as I said previously, you can also add it as a decorative edge. So if I just move this out of the way for a minute, again I've got another garment here where the band of the cardigan has been knitted in a knit 2 purl 2 rib, but then I've done 2 rows of garter stitch at the top of the rib and then cast off with the sewn cast off to make a nice decorative contrast edge. That's the sewn cast off.